Oh shit!
Trying again.
The sound you hear is the roll of a 12-sided die. You're playing D&D with your friends in a basement rumpus room. The year is 1996. There's a flickering Coors Light sign over the bar and movie posters for Young Guns, Predator, The Lost Boys, and Dirty Dancing hanging on the wood-paneled walls. Behind the bar, there's a locked cabinet where your friend's dad hides his stash of vintage Playboys. The Smashing Pumpkins play faintly through miniature speakers hooked up to a CD Discman. The stink of Pizza Hut hangs heavy in the air, and you can still taste the grape soda you washed down your slice of stuffed crust with. This is the start of Octoberpod. The story that follows is a fictionalized recounting of true events. The facts of the case have been altered to protect the privacy and dignity of the real victims, survivors, and their families. Oh, one more thing. The following tale contains subject matter which some listeners may find disturbing, including references to animal cruelty, alcoholism, and drug abuse. Listener discretion is advised.
I was a scaredy cat as a child. I didn't like horror at all. Even some of the spooky comedy movies of the 1980s frightened me. Maybe I had too vivid of an imagination. Shocking visuals tended to stay rooted in the wrinkles of my brain, whether through TV and movies or fantastic imagery in books. Perhaps that's a story for another time, but I loved stories. I loved fairy tales, mythology, and folklore. Maybe I liked that every culture had fascinating beliefs about how the world worked. I also liked that when everything seemed darkest, there was always hope. In those stories, people stood up and fought back. I longed for that in my tiny suburban life. Anyway, I let my love for stories and culture guide my interest in the paranormal. I became quite a paranormal enthusiast at a young age. A devotee of the Dewey Decimal classifications 001.9 and 130 in the library. I read up on poltergeists, Bigfoot, UFOs, hauntings, and everything in between. I was a massive fan of sightings and unsolved mysteries, never once guessing that my boring suburban life would brush up against one of those mysteries. In 1995, I was a senior in high school. I was getting good grades and was excited about going to college. I had a small, intimate circle of friends, and one of them asked if we were interested in trying a tabletop role-playing game. What do you mean by that, I asked. You mean, like, pretending to be someone else? Well, yes, answered my friend. But it's more than that. You create a character, make decisions, and play as that character. I will be the game master, so I'm giving you guys the setting, the rules, and the basics of the plot. The rest is up to the roll of a die. Isn't this like Dungeons and Dragons? Asked another friend. Well, yeah.
Touched by a Vampire. Written especially for Octoberpod by Whitney Zahar. Inspired by her own true experiences. Starring Jennifer, creator-host of Haunted Happenstance. With additional narration by Edward October.
I had heard of Dungeons and Dragons. I remember watching the cartoon show on Saturday morning. But I'd also seen the movie Mazes and Monsters, which showed a young Tom Hanks playing a kid who lost all sense of reality due to playing a fantasy tabletop role-playing game. A thinly veiled caricature of Dungeons and Dragons. I also remembered when I was still going to a church a few years prior, a so-called cult cop did a presentation for several local youth groups about Satanism and cults. He warned us impressionable young teens about the dangers of Dungeons and Dragons with its occult symbols, magical spells, and fearsome creatures. He also warned us about the song Bat Dance by Prince for some odd reason, but I digress. I didn't know what to think. My parents were moderate people. They had a strong community in their Methodist church, but I never thought of them as preachy. These were the darkest days of the Satanic Panic, but my parents didn't badger me all that much. I trusted my friends. They were intelligent, kind-hearted, and creative people. The guy who said he would be the game master was level-headed and lovely. Also, I was in theater classes at school. The way he described tabletop role-playing games sounded like the scaffolding exercises we did in drama class regarding character development and motivation, and it sounded like it would help me with my improvisation skills. I turned to my friends with an impish grin and said, "Let's do it."
Jonathan František Atwater was not born a monster. His mother was a Czech who had immigrated to the United States in 1969. His father, Brother Levi Atwater, was a fire and brimstone preacher without a church. He preached his fringe, fundamentalist brand of Pentecostalism in high school gymnasiums, bingo hall basements, or off the tailgate of a pickup truck. Brother Levi's sermons were unvaryingly grotesque, often drawn from Apocrypha as much as from the Gospels, usually lapsing into incoherence, as Brother Levi was prone to speak in tongues. It is unknown whether his angelic speech should be attributed to the intervention of the Holy Spirit or to the influence of grain alcohol. Brother Levi's faith emphasized the importance of Holy Communion, and he begged his tiny flock to eat the flesh of Christ and drink his blood every Sunday. "The blood of Christ Jesus was shed for you," he would say. "Only by drinking his blood will you find salvation," he would say.
My friends and I spent every Friday night during my senior year in that furnished attic room at my house, playing a game called Palladian Rifts, and occasionally dipping our toes into advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I had so much fun. It was nothing I expected and was much more about creativity, friendship, and memories. We all graduated high school and kept hanging out together over the summer. We continued our Rifts campaign, which was taking a darker turn in the story. Our band of heroes was running afoul of a plot involving vampires, and I was in heaven. I loved vampires. Next to ghosts, vampires were my favorite monster. Yes, I love the goth aesthetic, the allure, and the romance of being swept away and possessed by a dark force whose ancient will and focus is solely on the object of their desire. I loved Dracula, the book, and the movies. During my senior year, our fall play was Dracula. I tried to read Stephen King's Salem's Lot, but wasn't quite into it since I was only in the 9th grade when I read it. I was avowedly Team Damon when the Vampire Diaries series were just a handful of young adult novels. I loved how the Rift system portrayed vampires. If you wanted the suave, sophisticated, deadly monsters, you had the Master Vampire. But there was more to it. Vampires were a result of being connected to an alien vampire intelligence, and they had the potential to become more savage and monstrous. I also explored Vampire the Masquerade, another tabletop role-playing game that relied on character development and narrative storytelling. You could say 1995 to 1996 was my year of the vampire. How little did I know at the time that monsters were real. My role-playing crew also played Magic the Gathering, laser tag, and that was how I met this guy. He had a D&D character named Draven Thunderpelt, so I just called him Draven. He was a Navy recruit in his early 20s, and cute in a rugged way. He played in the laser tag leagues, and for whatever reason, we hooked up. I was 18 years old, so I could legally go to the dance club since that's what our dates were. He also taught me how to rollerblade. We made out a few times, but never went all the way, which, in retrospect, was a very good thing.
No one ever remembers Jonathan Atwater's first victim, 11-year-old Ingushka. She was the family dog. Ingushka was part poodle, part traveling salesman, as Brother Levi would describe her. And she was the first lasting friend John's mother made when she arrived in America. So she named the dog after a Polish girl she'd known back in the old country. Following his mother's death, Brother Levi had tried unsuccessfully to pray her cancer away. Ingushka became the closest thing to a mother figure in John's life. John was almost morbidly devoted to his mother, but with her gone, Brother Levi was free to impose his harsh discipline and twisted beliefs on his son. Levi forced John to study his own medieval interpretations of Christianity whenever John wasn't in school. Public schools, incidentally, were institutions Levi regarded with some suspicion. When Ingushka, already an old dog, drew close to the end of her life, sources are unclear as to whether she was terminally ill or had suffered a debilitating injury. John staged a grotesque communion ritual during which John ate Ingushka's flesh and drank her blood. John would later admit this was an attempt to force the dog's soul to pass into his body.
One night he introduced me to a friend of his named John. John was lanky, dressed in black, with brown hair and sharp features. I guess I would call him attractive. He was very courteous and polite towards me and never behaved inappropriately. Draven seemed okay with John paying attention to me. Before I left for the first year of college, John told me that Draven loved me and wanted to get me a promise ring. Draven even visited me at school, and I visited him when I returned on break. I was out one night with Draven and John during that break, giving them a ride home. From the back seat, John spoke up and said, "I need to tell you something. You're Draven's girl and part of my life too. I think you have a special sensitivity, which makes you trustworthy in my eyes." I glanced into my rearview mirror. For a moment, John's reflection was wreathed in shadows, rendering him invisible. Then he said, "I'm a vampire. I'm a vampire." Somehow I kept focused on driving, occasionally glancing back in the rearview mirror. I said nothing, just listening to John explain himself. He called himself a psychic vampire, in which he subsisted on energy rather than blood. He found me fascinating because of my bright aura, but I could rest easy. He meant no harm to me. He then told me he was the elder vampire of a clan with a long history from ancient Europe. His mother, I learned, had been from Poland or Czechoslovakia or somewhere. Apparently, there were several of these vampire clans all over the world. They had different powers and weaknesses, but the eldest could be thousands of years old. John said the vampire clans existed parallel to humans, a shadow society that influenced human history for millennia. However, the average human had no clue they existed, thanks to rules called the Masquerade, which concealed vampires from humanity. What was I supposed to think? I was an 18-year-old girl alone in the car with two guys, and one of them had just claimed he was a vampire. At the time, I only wanted to drop them off at their place and get home myself. I said nothing except, "Thank you for sharing that with me." It's not like the books when the monster does the big reveal to their significant other, and all is wonder and awe. John wasn't my boyfriend. He was hardly more than a friendly acquaintance. Draven and I hadn't even been dating that long, and Draven was sitting in the car perfectly fine with all the crazy bullshit that John was spouting at me. After dropping them off, I drove home with my hands shaking. I couldn't believe what John had said. When you run in gaming groups and theater clubs like I did, you encounter your fair share of people who claim to be something they're not. I get it. Sometimes the character you portray is infinitely more interesting than the person you really are. Some people I've met over the years are uncomfortable in their skin. Sometimes it's a rush to pretend you're someone else. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you know it's just a game, a play, a fictional story that you're helping create. But I got the impression John believed every word of the awful mythology he had created around himself.
Crystal Henderson, age 17, would never be able to articulate precisely what it was that attracted her to John Atwater, the boy she knew as Lord Frontischek. He was handsome, well, handsome enough, and he filled her mind with such wonderful notions. He swept into her life like a black angel. Up until that point, she felt as though she'd been living her life as some sort of alien creature, utterly unable to relate to anyone else around her. Then, at last, she'd found another one of her kind, another member of a clan that she'd been a part of all her life without even knowing. The world of mystery and magic and shadow he revealed to her was such a liberating escape from her depressing home life. A home life spent parenting her younger siblings for a father who was always working and a stepmother who'd gotten hooked on Percocets following a near-fatal automobile accident. But with Lord Frontishek, she could be a child of the night, free to worship unashamed at the altar of blood and seek life everlasting. The body of Crystal Henderson would be found on July 12, 1994, as part of an all-too-brief missing persons investigation. All the signs of a ritual killing were present. The body had been placed fetishistically on a crude pentagram, sketched in chalk on the concrete behind an abandoned radio shack. Glyphs and occult graffiti could be found all around the crime scene, though not all of them were related to the murder. The county coroner would later state that Crystal's body had been completely exsanguinated, the only such case he'd seen in a long and storied career, though precious little of her blood was present at the crime scene. John Atwater would eventually confess to this murder in an unsuccessful attempt by his lawyers to reduce a lengthy prison sentence. He explained that he'd caught Crystal Henderson's blood in a bucket as it gushed from a wound in her neck. The blood, he said, was part of a batch he'd frozen for future consumption.
Okay, on my way. Adam 1035 Mary.
It was hard to take John at his word. After getting some distance from the situation and returning to college, I realized he used terminology he'd ripped off from the tabletop role-playing game Vampire the Masquerade. Words like elder, clan, masquerade, and embrace, or the act of siring a vampire, filled John's descriptions and came straight from the game. I had been reading about Vampire the Masquerade for a while, and soon I would be playing the game. So, yes, I had an inkling that John was bullshitting me. And yet, it would be fantastic if vampires, dragons, unicorns, werewolves, and all of the fantastical creatures existed in the real world. What if magic in some form is real? This may be the real world, but I can assure you that monsters are real too. I think, if anything, my love of tabletop role-playing games and these stories taught me that even real monsters can be defeated. I found out later from a mutual acquaintance that Draven was cheating on me. Oh, but she isn't as pretty as you are, the acquaintance assured me. Whatever. I'd moved on by that point anyway. I never heard from John again after that night. He didn't have my contact information in the first place, and since Draven and I weren't together, there was no reason for us to interact. I heard nothing more about John until the summer of 1996.
To consume one's blood was to acquire their soul. By John Atwater's own reckoning, he had acquired 6 souls, all of them girls and women aged 16 to 23, most of them runaways and transients, some groomed as recruits for his vampire clan, to be his slaves and concubines in whatever afterlife awaited him. The state could do whatever it wanted with him, because John was content knowing that beyond this life, a kingdom befitting a black angel awaited him, with the souls of his victims bound to him, catering to his every whim and desire. Though Jonathan Frontishek Atwater was supposed to remain behind bars for several decades, his fellow inmates had other plans. Atwater was stabbed 84 times by a pair of white nationalists, armed with sharpened toothbrushes, who disapproved of his rather esoteric beliefs. Brother Levi Atwater, in spite of disowning John after his horrible crimes came to light, he didn't even attend the trial, claimed his son's body, and gave it a humble burial at a nearly forgotten graveyard in the foothills of County. Levi Atwater is alive and well and holds a position of some importance at a prosperous Northern Virginia megachurch. He remarried in 2013 and is stepfather to 3 adult stepchildren with grandbabies on the way.
John proved to the world how much of a monster he was. I found out that he had been arrested and later convicted of several ritual killings. So much for all of that energy vampire horseshit. He even appeared on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries in 1997. It turned out he used the same story he told me to lure girls about my age to join his vampire family. He gathered about 30 girls into his group and ended up killing and drinking the blood of 4 of them. I think I knew one of the victims. She was my sister's age. He convinced these girls that he was their family, loved them, and all they had to do was give themselves to him. John may not have been a real vampire, but he certainly was a predator. My God, what if? What was it that protected me from this trap? Was there something about me that made me different from these other girls? Or was it just dumb luck? To this day, I don't know how complicit Draven was in the whole thing. Were he and John in on it together? In another reality, I could be a victim, an accomplice, or something else in this story. Or perhaps, just perhaps, there is something to me having a bright aura after all.
You have been listening to Touched by a Vampire, written by Whitney Zahar, from her own personal experiences. Whitney is the co-host of the Para-Unity podcast. Find the Para-Unity podcast on all major podcast platforms. Whitney also wrote these awesome books, The Safe Room and Nova, as well as a bunch of short stories, some of which are collected in the anthologies Autumn Tales and Women of the Woods. Check out her author's page on Amazon. Finally, it wouldn't be an Octoberpod vampire story without our dear friend and returning narrator, Jennifer. She is the creator-host of an impeccable podcast called Haunted Happenstance, which you can find at hauntedhappenstance.libsyn, that's libsyn.com. I'll be back with the intermission. Keep it right here. Monsters do have their place. In the zoo, in your nightmares, in the deep, in your favorite horror movies, but not on your phone during an ad break. Politically motivated interests are seeking to influence you through the ads placed on this podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Edward October, reminding you that we have very limited control over the ads you hear on Octoberpod. Please remember that only the ads and promos I read with my own voice carry the endorsement of Edward October and Octoberpod. Furthermore, I and the makers of Octoberpod repudiate any entity advertised which seeks to promote hatred, anti-American or anti-democratic sentiments, or the spread of misinformation. Now, with that in mind, Octoberpod will return after this brief ad break. It's intermission time, folks. I'm your host, Mr. Edward October. A few months ago, I called in and chatted with Amber and Maddie of the podcast Witches Talking Tarot. What began as a personal tarot reading spun off into a freewheeling conversation about horror movies, serial killers, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and even Lord of the Rings. Keen listeners will hear us planning to adapt Amber's True Haunted Doll story for a future Octoberpod episode, an episode which dropped a few weeks back if you missed it. What follows are some excerpts from that conversation. One more thing. My end of the conversation was conducted over the phone. I couldn't get my mic configured properly, so please overlook the imperfections in audio quality. Okay, let's get to it.
tarot is a tool we use. It does not tell the future. It reads the energies that exist right now, in the here and now. So we can't change the past. And we can only change the present so much as what we're aware of and what we do going forward. So tarot is a tool to guide us in what the energies around us right now are saying is going to happen in our future if we keep down the exact straight path we're going. Through our own ability to manifest our own destiny, our own ability to make personal choices and identify what's going on and make choices to change that. This is a tool just to help us make those choices in the future. Mm-hmm. Not everything that is said is set in stone.
The tarot character in Live and Let Die is named Solitaire, which is kind of a classy name for a tarot reader character.
I do like
that.
That is actually class act right there, with the cards and everything.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I know there's like somebody Goodhead.
Oh yeah, there's Holly Goodhead in Moonraker. There is Pussy Galore, obviously.
Pussy Galore.
That's where a lot of vagina comes from, right? Is because Pussy Galore.
Honey Rider.
Yeah. BB Doll is in For Your Eyes Only.
That's so cute.
They had to have done this on purpose.
Well, absolutely. No way
there
was so much double entendre on purpose because, like, these movies originated in what, like the 60s, where there was a lot you actually couldn't say. I mean,
right.
Like, you know, Lenny Bruce went to jail a whole lot of times because of stuff he couldn't say.
I like Xena Onatopp. Shut the hell up.
Well, there's in The World Is Not Enough, Denise Richards plays Christmas Jones, and you're like, oh, this isn't funny. But then at the very end, where she and Bond are in bed, he goes, you know, well, what they say isn't true. And she's like, what's that? He's like, I thought Christmas only comes once a year. But so.
Oh my
dude, God. I love that. The redhead's name is Strawberry Fields.
Strawberry Fields, yeah.
Are you serious?
What's stupid about that is that her name is not, you only see her name in the credits. In the movie, they just call her Agent Fields, and they never say her first name. And they're like, missed opportunity.
That's
why? Yeah, that is a missed opportunity. See, like, I am just not into James Bond movies. I like, when it comes to like, yeah, like older movies, it's at whatever my mom watched. So like I saw like I think Metropolis. It was a Francis Ford Coppola movie that was fucking weird. I saw that a lot growing up, and it's like imprinted in very, very young memories. And I watched the silent
film Metropolis.
Maybe. My mom liked some old. My mom liked old stuff, and that was the 80s. So I don't know. And it was like futuristic and.
I'm thinking. I think I'm thinking of a different movie. I think, but
yeah, because like I highly doubt it was silent because I don't think like we watched it before I was old enough to read. I know that, like for sure. Like that was, you know, yeah, it was like.
Oh, now you've got me. Now my head is stuck. It's trying to figure out.
I gotta Google it.
Right, I'm like, because like people were. I'm pretty sure the guy from Pumpkinhead was in this when he was younger, but I'm not positive. It might have just been somebody who looks like him. Yeah, it might not be Lance. It might be somebody that like very striking resemblance to Lance, but like.
And it's Coppola? It's a Coppola movie?
1927? This one?
I think there might have been. Was there a remake?
This must be the silent film.
Yeah, that must be like. Is there?
In the 80s, they took the silent Metropolis movie and put like a rock score on top of it, and maybe even colorized it.
Okay, like my parents probably.
It says it's like an influential German science fiction film.
Okay, yeah. I will find this film after I'm done. Like.
Okay.
Like,
no, you do.
Yeah, Metropolis is one of the most influential movies ever. Like the design for C-3PO comes from it, and a lot of like production design from Blade Runner and shots from Blade Runner come right out of Metropolis. It's.
I can see the
But I think we're talking about different movies.
Yeah. Well, and I know I've seen Metropolis and the remake thing with the music that sounds like my dad would put that on. Like he's a big Pink Floyd guy. And that sounds
And it was
like
a band like that. It wasn't Pink Floyd, but it was like
it was like
something
that. And
from
my
the
dad loves psychedelic.
Tangerine Dream, or like
Yeah.
one of those guys.
Like he made like gas chambers out of the. Why?
Now, I recently heard that a lot of the H.H. Holmes story was kind of fabricated by journalists at the time. Like,
I could see that kind of like
if they went into his house and they found,
if
they found a table in the room, they'd be like, "Oh, this must have been his torture table," and like really embellishing all of the details they found. I'm a big old time radio fan, and there's an episode of a show called Lights Out. There's an episode that's called Murder Castle, I think is the name of it, and it's a very much like H.H. Holmes. It's a guy who like keeps hiring governesses, and like he'll lead them down into a room full of wet cement and cement them over, and like all of this like weird like.
But people are.
This is back in the 40s.
People do shit like that. That's what just shocks me is the fact that people have and do shit like that.
Oh God, that's so horrific. I mean, yeah, it does happen. It's just horrific, and I'm all like, that's.
I really liked,
but the press does like. I mean,
like Lizzie Borden. Everybody remembers the Lizzie Borden case, and everybody remembers the nursery rhyme about Lizzie Borden. But Lizzie Borden was acquitted.
Well, it doesn't matter if she did it or not. Everybody has decided.
Well, it's a good story. I've watched so many, like the Christina Ricci adaptation TV shows. I really like those. I shouldn't, because it like paints her as like this psychopath.
Well, it's like the Black Dahlia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like everybody knows the Black Dahlia, and there's been, I don't know if it was proven that it was her dentist or not. But like everybody has their own theories on what happened. Pretty sure it was the dentist.
Like my sides early. Sorry.
Sorry, I was listening to a podcast a while back that went into. It was actually the segment that I listened to was talking about the crime novelist James Ellroy and his sort of obsession with the Black Dahlia. And it was weird. It was kind of wild because the Black Dahlia happened at about the same time as his own mother was killed, and so he kind of got into like crime writing as a way to sort of, and looking into Black Dahlia as a way to sort of process his grief and feelings about his own mother through the Black Dahlia. So it's like he investigated the Black Dahlia murder as like a proxy for investigating his own mother's murder. But
that's really interesting, because I mean, Dominic Dunn, we'll talk about this more in a couple of weeks, viewers, but like Dominic Dunn, when his daughter was killed, she was the big sister on the Poltergeist movies, but when she was murdered by her boyfriend, like now we know of him as a true crime writer because like he investigated that and other things, because he was like, the justice system isn't enough. And it was a way for him to heal from what happened to his daughter. And I mean, I'm pretty sure he does crime specials like to this day. I don't know. I just thought
Poltergeist curse. The Poltergeist curse. Bullshit or not?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to be covering that in a couple of episodes.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, we're excited. Also, an excuse to watch Poltergeist. She is convinced that Samwise and Frodo are like a couple. And I mean, they definitely.
Have you ever seen that meme? Have you ever seen the meme of it's a picture of Elijah Wood riding on a Segway, smoking a cigarette in a cigarette holder, next to a picture of Sean Astin wearing like 80s Oakley sunglasses, ball cap, and a crop top baseball jersey that shows like his whole belly, like carrying wood. And the caption is, remake Lord of the Rings with this Sam and this Frodo.
That Sam is from 51st Dates, and that is amazing.
I love that.
I love him in 51st Dates. I don't ever think about him that much in that movie, because obviously that is Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. But I do love his character, because like he does wear those mesh tank tops, and
yeah,
it's great. Great.
So my Tom Bombadil story
Yes, thank you.
Kind of-
I was just about to ask.
is kind of a parenting tip or a parenting hack. When my kid was really little, we had to come up with strategies to get him to give up things that he had outgrown, like his pacifiers and his certain clothes that he loved that he outgrew and stuff like that. So what we did is that we sort of created Tom Bombadil as like a Santa Claus or Tooth Fairy figure. And so we said, hey, if you donate these things to, I forget where we put them. I don't remember where we put them. But like, hey, if you set these things out for Tom Bombadil, he'll take them and give them to a kid that needs them, and he'll leave you a present. So that's how we used Tom Bombadil to get our son to stop using his pacifier and like give up his high chairs, stuff like that.
That is fucking genius. Like, I'm gonna tell my husband, and I guarantee we're gonna do that with our grandchildren. Because, like,
there you go.
My youngest kid's 17, so like our kids are all grown. But he's already like making plans for when we're grandparents, which is weird because we're like 40. But it's like, okay, I'm gonna tell him about that because he also Tom Bombadil is his favorite character as well. Like,
there you go. So we sort of made him like a non-denominational Santa Claus type figure.
Yes,
so.
That is genius because getting kids to like give up certain things, like getting them out of
it's
like,
tough.
oh, I'm still gonna wear this shirt even though it comes up to like right here.
They love it.
I know. That's so genius.
And I also like Amityville Horror, the original is another.
I love both.
In the fall.
The original and with Ryan Reynolds. Zam!
Wow.
Like the beard.
It's our first Zam Wow, season 4.
Yes. I love them both, but they're both awful. I mean, they're great, but also it's just like, I am so sick and tired of these men being like, the house isn't haunted. It's haunted. What is the problem with you?
But it wasn't.
It's a trashy movie.
It is in the movie. It is in the movie.
I do love the Amityville movies. Like when I was a kid, I'd watched like all the awful ones too, like number 2, number 3, and like all of them. Now I just like
you
OG and the ring.
You can't hate a movie that's got a puking nun, Lois Lane doing the most bizarre like ballet routine ever, and it. So you got Rod Steiger eating up all of the scenery. It's just beautiful, beautiful trash, and it's a very autumnal, It
is. That is a good point. I don't think I actually usually watch Amityville Horror in the summertime because they live on that lake and there's the boat scene, and that just makes me associate it with summer. But they're chopping wood because it is
winter time.
Yeah,
and I like the Amityville Horror. I really do. Like, I like the movie. We're we're specifically discussing the movies. And I do like them. It's just the dad just makes me so goddamn mad because he's like, and all
because he's the one that's possessed. Of course, he doesn't believe it because his possession is like, no, it's cool. No, it's
well, and it's like all dads are like, how dare you? We got this house for $20,000, and it's like an ancient plantation house, or it's a big old 6-bedroom house. Why was it $20,000? Why was it so cheap?
Now, have you seen? There's a documentary called My Amityville Horror.
Yes,
all about the kid all grown up. I thought that was really interesting.
Ronnie?
Yeah,
I have.
No, not Ronnie DeFeo. It was.
The other
Lutz.
kid, the
Lutz's kid.
Lutz kid. Okay.
George Lutz's kid. But
because I have watched my Amityville Horror, but I also watched a lot of documentaries about the DeFeo killings.
Yeah. This is more about how the Warrens sort of had an influence over how the Amityville story was shaped and how that had kind of
we're gonna be
watching tonight.
The Amityville. We are actually
Yeah.
going to be talking about Ed and Lorraine Warren
tomorrow,
which I'm excited to do because
which is funny because I think it might actually go out before this. We haven't actually like put on paper exactly.
we just haven't.
Yeah, so it might go out before this. It might go out the weekend.
Ed and Lorraine fuck a lot of shit up.
They're terrible.
They really do.
Oh my god,
it's crazy. Like watching the Conjuring movies, and they're made out to be like superheroes, but
I
they
do
were
like
these.
them. I like them.
Yeah.
Just like it's like with the Amityville horror.
Oh yeah, they're
totally
they're good
different
trash.
than real
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
you know what?
But the real life Warrens were like snake oil salesmen. And,
Yes.
Man,
crazy, probably Christian nationalist type.
well, and also,
Yes.
how much shit did they fuck up spiritually coming in there? You know what I mean?
Oh my god, I can't wait to have the whole conversation. But like, oh my god, like such bad people, such pieces of actual trash.
I feel like there's a couple.
Well, and didn't Ed aren't there stories of Ed being untowards?
A teenager
towards yeah.
And then Lorraine making that teenager get rid of Ed's mistake, even though they're Catholic.
Okay, I haven't done the research, guys. Spoiler. What?
Oh yeah, spoiler.
They're such terrible.
Yeah, there's some.
Like,
there's some shit.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. Like now I know why. Whenever I don't know if you ever notice my face when you're like, I love Ed and Lorraine, and I'm like, why? And it's because I know them from. Well, I grew up with just documentaries that they were involved in, and the movies came when I was like 30 almost, you know? Actually, like in my 30s is when the movies came out. So like I never mentally put them together when I watched The Conjuring, because before I watched all the movies for the episode that we're going to do, I'd only ever seen The Conjuring. And The Conjuring scared the actual shit out of me. It was the first time ever that I almost ripped my popcorn bucket in half and had popcorn go everywhere. But like I've never had that happen in a movie before ever. And that movie scared the shit out of me. But then like when I was realizing that this couple in the movie is these people from stuff I watched like in the 80s and 90s, I was like,
it's a good story.
This makes sense as to why I was like, what?
Like you said, like with Lizzie Borden, that everybody focuses on she's a killer, she did that. Everybody's focusing on the positive.
Well, no, because
we're making it positive for Ed and Lorraine. It's like everybody makes it negative.
That was her stipulation to do the movies.
Really? Was she alive? When did she die?
She's still alive.
She's still alive?
Pretty
sure.
Yeah.
She
you're like, bitch, do your research.
Yeah, I haven't done it. I know.
Talking about it.
I thought she died just recently.
Maybe she died really
2015. I may be wrong.
Because like one of the things, and granted, I was probably watching older documentaries, but I could have sworn like when I was reading, or the last thing said like, and she's still alive, but that might have been produced a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know how old that was.
I think it's fairly recent that she died, but they're kind of problematic. They're not.
Yeah. 2019.
And the case from The Haunting to the case from The Conjuring to the.
Oh my gosh.
But
I like the actress.
Fabricated to me.
I like the
that's
actress.
My favorite Conjuring.
Her in the movies.
Well, and it's so funny because I'd never seen The Conjuring 2 before like a week or two ago when I watched them, and I told Maddie when I was watching them. But like I remember, like I've seen that story on like Discovery Channel shows and stuff like that so many times.
I was familiar with that one.
Yeah, so I was like, the crazy way that they depict it in the movie, I'm like, that didn't happen. And I'm like, okay, yes, it's a movie. It's a movie. I have to be like, it's based on true events. But like,
I've got a few of those on my channel.
I like Patrick Wilson.
Well, one of my stories is actually based on true events.
Yours is true. I have true and true-ish stories. And yours is all true.
That was fun times. Yeah, I actually was just telling my most recent scary story to Mama D on Petals of Support last night because it happened last September, and it involves a doll named Annabelle. So I figure I'll talk about that as well on our Ed and Lorraine episode.
I'm looking at.
type it up
go
and send it to me, and we'll October
Okay.
it too.
Oh, yeah, because this is crazy. Like, you wouldn't
I'm
believe
on
it.
the
Like,
hunt for true stories.
okay.
You know.
Yeah,
so.
and it does involve a doll named Annabelle, because a
Oh.
mutual friend of ours,
Yeah.
she
Let's
went
fucking
down
go.
to
Yeah.
yeah, she collects haunted dolls, and this one's named Annabelle, and it's gray, so that's creepy, and it has no eyeballs, so creepier.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
They would
she's
get along with Jen from our True Crime podcast. She collects doll heads. So yeah,
That's
you
so
guys see her.
crazy. Oh.
Yeah, she talks about that in the group chat that we're in. Yeah, she has like a whole mantle. She's shown me pictures of just doll heads.
Okay, the dichotomy of different kinds of people who like paranormal shit. I have a collection of rubber duckies. Like, I have a whole, like, 2 shelves of rubber duckies, but doll heads, fuck that.
I have a collection of Pez dispensers. So
Nice. That's cool.
So.
That's cool.
that's a spook.
Wow.
I'm very not spooky in real life.
To hear my full tarot reading, listen to the October episode of Witches Talking Tarot. You can find them on YouTube or wherever fine podcasts can be heard. Now sit back in a comfortable chair next to the loudspeaker and get ready for your spine to tingle. Our next tale of the supernatural starts now. I wanted to be alone. I hastily packed up my knapsack and, taking the train to Westmoreland, I began my tramp in a search of solitude, bracing air, and romantic surroundings. There are many places I might have come upon during that early summer wandering, but fate was driving me to this cottage on the moor, and no man can resist his destiny. One day I found myself on a wide and pathless moor near the sea. I had slept the night before at a small hamlet, but that was already 8 miles behind me, and since I had turned my back upon it, I had not seen any signs of humanity. I was alone with a fair sky above me, a balmy wind blowing over stony, heather-clad mounds, and nothing to disturb my meditations. How far the moor stretched I had no knowledge. I only knew that by keeping a straight line, I could come to the ocean cliffs, then perhaps after a time arrive at some fishing village. I had provisions in my knapsack, and being young, I did not fear a night under the stars. I was inhaling the delicious summer air, and once more getting back the vigor and happiness I had lost. My brains that had been numbed by city life began to wake up. Thus hour after hour slid past me, until I covered about 15 miles since morning, when I saw before me in the distance a solitary, stone-built cottage with roughly slated roof. I quickened my steps towards it, with some vague notion of camping there, if possible. To one in search of a quiet, free life, nothing could have possibly been more suitable than this cottage. It stood on the edge of lofty cliffs, with its front door facing the moor, and the backyard wall overlooking the ocean. The sound of the dancing waves struck upon my ears like a lullaby as I drew near. How they would thunder when strong gales came on and the seabirds fled shrieking to the shelter of the sedges. A small garden spread in front, surrounded by a dry stone wall, just high enough for one to lean lazily upon when inclined. This garden was a flame color, scarlet predominating, with those other soft shades that cultivated poppies take on in their blooming, for this was all that the garden grew. As I approached, taking notice of this singular assortment of poppies and the orderly cleanness of the windows, the front door opened and a woman appeared who impressed me at once favorably, as she leisurely came along the pathway to the gate and drew it back as if to welcome me. She was of middle age, and when young must have been remarkably handsome. She was tall and still shapely, with smooth, clear skin, regular features, and a calm expression that at once put me at ease. She said she could give me both a sitting and bedroom, and invited me inside to see them. As I looked at her smooth black hair and cool brown eyes, I felt that I would not be too particular about the accommodation. With such a landlady, I was sure to find what I was seeking here. The room surpassed my expectation. Dainty white curtains and bedding with the perfume of lavender about them. A sitting room, homely yet cozy without being crowded. With a sigh of infinite relief, I flung down my knapsack and clinched the bargain. As she was a widow with one daughter, whom I did not see that first day, as she was unwell and confined to her own room. But on the next day she was somewhat better, and then we met. The meals they served me were simple ones, yet they suited me. Delicious milk and butter with homemade scones, fresh eggs and bacon. After a hearty tea, I went to bed in a condition of perfect content with my quarters. Yet happy and tired out as I was, I had by no means a comfortable night. This I put down to the strange bed. Of course I did sleep, but my sleep was filled with dreams so wild that I woke late and unrefreshed. A good walk on the moor would surely restore me. The loneliness of the moor, with the singing of the ocean, had gripped my heart with a wistful longing. The incongruity of those flaunting and evanescent poppy flowers, dashing the giddy tints in the face of that sober gray heath, touched me with a shiver as I approached the cottage. I'd worked up a fine appetite for breakfast. It was over breakfast that I was introduced to the landlady's daughter, Ariadne. And in that moment I succumbed instantly to her weird charms. She was in somewhat better health this morning and felt well enough to breakfast with me. In fact, we would eat all of our meals together while I was a lodger there. Ariadne was not beautiful in any conventional sense, her complexion being too lividly white and her expression too set to be quite pleasant at first sight. Yet, as her mother had informed me, she had been ill for some time, which accounted for that slight defect. Her features were not regular. Her hair and eyes seemed too black with that strangely white skin, and her lips a trifle too red. Her beauty was more haunting than classical, otherworldly, alien. Ariadne rose from her chair as her mother introduced her, and smiled while she held out her hand for me to clasp, cold and delicate and soft as a snowflake. A faint thrill tingled over me and rested on my heart, stopping for the moment in its beating. This contact seemed also to have affected her as it did me. A clear flush like a white flame lighted up her face so that it glowed. Her black eyes became softer as our glances crossed, and her scarlet lips grew moist. She was a living woman now, while before she had seemed half a corpse. She permitted her slender hand to remain in mine longer than most people do at an introduction, and then she slowly withdrew it, still holding me with steadfast eyes for a second or two afterwards. Fathomless, velvety eyes these were, yet before they were shifted from mine, they appeared to have absorbed all my willpower and made me her abject slave. They looked like deep dark pools of clear water, yet they filled me with fire and deprived me of strength. I sank languidly into my chair, as if in a swoon. Yet I ate a hearty breakfast, and although she hardly tasted anything, this strange girl rose much refreshed, and with a slight glow of color on her cheeks. I had come here seeking solitude, but since I had seen Ariadne, it seemed as if I had come for her only. She was not very lively. She answered my questions in monosyllables, yet she was insinuating and appeared to lead my thoughts in her direction. Indeed, she spoke to me with her eyes. I cannot describe her minutely. I only know that from the first glance and touch she gave me, I was bewitched and could think of nothing but her. It was a rapid, distracting, and devouring infestation that possessed me. All day long I followed her about like a lapdog. Every night I dreamed of that white glowing face, those steadfast black eyes, those moist scarlet lips, and each morning I rose feeling more languid than I had the day before. Sometimes I dreamt that she was kissing me with those red lips, while I shivered at the contact of her silky black tresses as they covered my throat. Sometimes I dreamed that we were floating in the air, her arms about me and her long hair enveloping us both like an inky cloud, while I lay helpless as an infant. Ariadne went with me after breakfast on that first day to the moor, and before we came back I had confessed my love and received her assent. I held her in my arms and had taken her kisses in answer to mine. I never once thought it strange that all this had happened so quickly. She was mine, or rather I was hers, without a pause. I told her it was fate that had sent me to her, for I had no doubts about my love, and she replied that I had restored her to life. Acting upon Ariadne's advice, and also from a natural shyness, I did not inform her mother how quickly matters had progressed between us. Yet, although we both acted as circumspectly as possible, I had no doubt my landlady could see how engrossed we were in each other. Lovers are not unlike ostriches in the clumsiness of their concealment. I was not afraid of asking for Ariadne's hand, so far as social position was concerned. After all, there could be no real objection to our marriage. They lived in this lonely spot for the sake of their health, and kept no servant because they could not get any to take service so far away from other humanity. My coming had surely been opportune and welcome to both mother and daughter. For our decorum, however, I resolved to delay my confession for a week or two, until some favorable opportunity of doing so discreetly presented itself. Meanwhile, Ariadne and I passed the days in the thoroughly idle fashion of a lotus eater. Each night I retired to bed, thirstily drinking down a warm nightcap. It tasted like an exceedingly tart mulled wine, which was always waiting on the bedside table. Each morning I rose languid from the disturbing dreams, with no thought for anything outside my love. Ariadne grew stronger every day, while I appeared to be taking her place as the invalid. Yet I was more frantically in love than ever, and only happy when I was at her side. She was my lone star, my only joy, my life. We did not travel great distances, for I liked best to lie on the dry heath and watch her glowing face and intense eyes while I listened to the surging of the distant waves. Love made me lazy, like a house cat basking in the sunshine. I had been enchanted quickly. My disenchantment came with equal speed, although it was long before the poison left my blood altogether. One night, about a couple of weeks after my coming to the cottage, I returned from a moonlight walk with Ariadne. The night was warm, and the moon full, so I left my bedroom window open to let in what little air there was. I was more fatigued than usual, so much so that I had only strength enough to remove my boots and coat before I flung myself on the coverlet and fell instantly asleep without first tasting the nightcap, which was my usual custom to imbibe. I had a ghastly dream this night. I thought I saw a monster bat with the face of Ariadne fly into the open window and fasten its needle-sharp white teeth and scarlet lips on my arm. I tried to beat the horror away but could not, for I seemed chained and enthralled in some damnable ecstasy as the beast sucked my blood with a gruesome rapture. I looked out dreamily and saw a line of dead bodies of young men lying on the floor, each with a red mark on their arms, on the same spot where the vampire was then sucking me. In a flash I understood the reason for my strange weakness, and at the same moment a sudden prick of pain roused me from my dreamy pleasure. The vampire, in her eagerness, had bitten a little too deeply that night, unaware that I had not consumed the drug that had been dissolved in my nightcap. As I woke, I saw her fully revealed by the moonlight, with her black tresses flowing, tangled with gore, her red lips glued to my arm. With a shriek of horror, I dashed her backwards, getting one last glimpse of her savage eyes, glowing white face, and blood-stained red lips. You have been listening to The Vampire MAID by Hume Nisbet, narrated by Edward October. Stick around after the credits for a brief word from some of our fellow indie podcasters, creators, and friends. There may even be some bloopers, outtakes, and bonus content as well. You have been listening to Octoberpod. Octoberpod is produced, edited, and directed by Edward October. The series co-producers are M.J. McAdams and Amber Jordan. Logo and banner graphics by Jessica Good. Edward October character design by Nick Calavera. Select still photography courtesy of unsplash.com. Select music cues by Dr. Dreamchip and various other stock music and sound effects courtesy of freesound.org. Music from Bigfoot Apocalypse and Thorax, theme from Octoberpod, composed by Nico Vitezi. All other images, music, and FX cues, except where noted, are sourced from within the public domain. Follow us on YouTube at Octoberpod Home Video, on Instagram, and the app I still call Twitter at Octoberpod VHS, and on TikTok and Blue Sky at Octoberpod. Or find us and all of our links on the World Wide Web at octoberpodvhs.com. For business inquiries or story submissions, email octoberpod@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this program, we'd be very pleased if you told your friends about us. And while you're at it, write us a 5-star or equivalent review wherever you're listening. The man who spoke to you was Mr. Edward October.
Hi, I'm Kayla, and my co-host Lexi and I host a podcast called A Little Wicked. We discuss true crime cases along with cults, conspiracy theories, cryptids, and really anything that we find strange or interesting to share with you guys. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to Shatsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunani, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that's sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
Yo, it's your boy Shitey from award-losing podcast Dungeons and Dickheads. Do you like unhinged, wholesome shenanigans performed by 4 people you've never heard of who have no idea how to D or D? Then we're the podcast for you. Search for Dungeons and Dickheads in your local podcast provider of choice. We're the purple one. Someone stole our name. Or, even better, go to dungeonsanddickheads.co.uk. That's dungeonsanddickheads.co.uk for all the episodes and some extras. Dungeons and Dickheads is the comedy podcast for people who don't D&D good and want to hear people D&D worse than them with so little budget they can't make a proper advert, but we're having fun anyway.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. So we may hear some landscapers, leaf blowing in the background, but that's just too fucking bad. Winter break is coming up, and the time I'm going to have alone in the house is limited because there's always going to be people in the fucking house because of Christmas. So we're just going to fix it in post. Sorry, not sorry. Lean into the gothic tone here.
In 1995, I was a senior in high school in Whereversville. In 1995, I was a senior in high school in Redacted.
Public schools. Public. Let's simplify that. Including references to animal cruelty and substance abuse. Listener. Ooh, you hear that fucking pop? Suspense, fair. Suspense, fanfare. What the fuck? Fucking A. Motherfucker, shit, fuck. What? The retro podcast for bold individualist. Ooh. That is loud.
Which listeners hang out for our Thursday episode. We're going to cover wands as a whole. Because we thought fire would go...
Or is it a later episode?
Well, it's for this.
Oh.
We're
recording.
This is October. This is October.
Yes, this is October. Exactly. And fire
you
goes
hear the leaf blowers outside my house sweeping the leaves away.
Damn it.
That is confusing.
I totally forgot. I meant to start this reading by going, all right, now we're going to find out about the man behind the pumpkin. Fuck.
Speaking of Tom Bombadil, I have remind me later, I have a Tom Bombadil story.
I will, because I love Tom.
How they would thunder when the autumn gales came on and the seabirds fled shrieking to the shelter of the sedges. Wasn't it supposed to fucking be summertime? Why are there autumn gales if it's fucking summertime? How they would thunder when gales came on and the seabirds fled. How they would thunder when the autumn gales... Probably a good place for a big old sting. Ooh. Could have been bad. A faint thrill tingled over me and rested on my heart, stopping for the moment it's beating. But what? Imperfections in audio quality. Imperfections in audio quality, like the fucking heater cutting on. Fuck it. I had provisions in my knapsack. This isn't the on-air reading of the title, but this is the Vampire Maiden. Airplanes while I'm recording. Who'd have thunk it? This is Edward October, creator-host of Octoberpod AM. But tonight I am running the elevator of history. Right. Now, does everyone have all their bits inside? Good. Here we go. FX elevator ding. First floor, primordial ooze. I wouldn't go out there if I were you. The sunsets are brilliant, but mostly fatal. FX ding. Second floor, dinosaurs. FX roar. I'm sorry, sir. You exceed the weight limit. I'm afraid you'll have to wait for the next elevator of history to come along. FX ding. Third floor, cave people. FX cave people chanting. Same to you, sir. FX ding. Fourth floor, early civilizations. Ah, ancient Greece. Lovely plays here. Just lovely. FX ding. And here we are at the 4th floor, the Roman Empire. The setting of tonight's story. Watch your step and mind the guys with the crests on their helmets and the short swords. Those are centurions, soldiers and peacekeepers of the Roman Empire. And now with a short overview of the Roman Empire in the 2nd century BC, here's Dean, the dad of Family Plot. With a shriek of horror, I dashed her backwards, getting one last glimpse of her savage eyes, glowing white face, and blood-stained red lips. Then I rushed out into the night. Then I rushed out to the night. Then I rushed out to the night, moved on by my fear and revulsion. I did not pause in my mad flight until I had left miles between me and that accursed village on the moor.